Today we're going to look at some of the simple things that can make brewing a lot easier. 16 tips that I wish I'd known before I got into brewing. These are things that I've learned along the way and picked up, and I'm sharing them with you to hopefully make your journey a little easier. Welcome back. I'm Craig, and this is the Backyard Brewer, a channel where it doesn't matter if you're a first timer or a more experienced brewer, there's something here for you. I'll take you through the process of making simple beers and then through some of the more advanced topics to help you brew better beer. The first tip is perfect your processes on simple beers. Don't launch yourself straight into hazies or triple IPAs or New England IPAs just because they're the latest craze. Start out on something simple like a pale ale, or even simpler than that, a smash beer. Smash stands for single malt and single hop, which means you need two ingredients, a type of malt, and I'd suggest starting with a pale malt to begin with, and a single hop, something like a Citra or a Cascade, something that's got a little bit of body to it. And the brewing process is quite simple. If you don't have room for all grain brewing, then fresh wort kits can be great too. Some of them allow you to customize them by adding your own hops, and you can change them up by selecting a different yeast as well. But whatever you do, start simple, because the complex brewing processes really do get quite involved, and you really need to master the basics first. The second tip is that you don't have to start on extract brewing. While it's a great place to start if you don't have any prior experience at all, or if you don't have the room, or you don't have time for a 6-hour brew day, then extract and fresh wort kits can be a great starting place. But if you don't want to start there, you don't have to. You can start on all grain brewing. Again, just start on something simple. Follow tip number 1. All grain brewing means it takes a little more time, and there's a bit more cleanup to do, but you really do have a lot of artistic license over the beer that you're producing. You get to select the grains, you get to select the hops, you get to select the yeast. You can follow recipes, but you can also customize those recipes yourself. So places like Beersmith and Grainfather are great resources for finding recipes, things that people have already tried and perhaps perfected themselves. But you can take those recipes and customize them to your own tastes as well. And once you've perfected your processes with a pale malt, then move on to something else like a Pilsner. Maybe take your pale malt and add a little Vienna malt to it and see what that does to the end product. Try different hops. Maybe try one hop for bittering and a different hop for flavour and aroma. The choices really are yours. The third tip is persevere. Every brewer has a bad brew day. Every brewer's made mistakes. Every brewer's had to tip a brew out because it was undrinkable. But persevere. Don't let these little setbacks stop you from brewing. Learn from the mistake, figure out what you did wrong, and then improve on it the next time round. Unless the beer you've produced is completely undrinkable, then batch it up and enjoy the fact that you made it. It may not be the best beer in the world, but it's something that you've made with your own two hands. And then make a second batch, make a third batch. Every time you'll get a little bit better. And that's the goal, is just to get a little bit better every time you brew. Number 4 is brew the styles of beer that you like to drink. Now you may want to go off on a tangent and brew something that you've never really tried before, like you may not have drunk a lot of sours, and you want to brew a sour so that you can try that. But I'm telling you now, if you brew the beers that you like to drink, you'll be able to tell whether you've produced a good beer or not. You'll be able to see where the mistakes are, and you'll be able to fix them the next time. And because it's a beer that you like to drink, you won't be disappointed drinking it. Let your palate and your nose be your guide to tell you whether you've done a good job or not. Rounding out the top 5, make the same beer more than once. Don't just make one batch, say, okay, I've done that. Make another batch, make a third batch, make a fourth batch. And each time do something a little bit different just to see how that improves or changes the flavour. The Mexican lager that I brew, I've done the 12th batch now and I'm just about happy with it. There's not a lot to tweak on it anymore. But in the beginning, I was tweaking the amount of grain that I was putting in. The first batch was okay. The second batch, I upped the grain bill to see what it would be like with more alcohol, and it wasn't as good, so I backed the grain bill off again. And then I tried some different hops. I tried a Citra hop. I tried a Cascade. I tried a Tettnang. I tried a Hallertau. And each of them did something just a little bit different. And in the end, I've come up with a combination of things that I like that are, in my opinion, delicious. And I've refined my processes to get that lager nice and crisp and clean and clear. I'm not trying to brew another Corona. I'm not trying to brew another Sol, or I'm not trying to brew another summer beer. It's a Mexican lager, but it's my Mexican lager, and I've perfected it. I've put in all the work to make it as good as it is, and I'm proud of that. Same as with my Anzac Ale. I've only done 4 batches of that, so I'm still in the early phase of my experimentation with that. I've tried a little bit more golden syrup to see if that comes through. I've tried a little bit more coconut. I've tried putting a little more biscuit malt in there just to play around with those flavours and see how they balance out against the hops. I'm only 4 batches in, but I'm starting to zero down on what I like out of that beer now. Number 6 is follow your brew day plan, whether you've got it written out on a sheet of paper, whether you use a spreadsheet or Brewfather or Beersmith or anything else, whatever your plan is for that brew day, follow it. And don't get carried away and sample too many of your own wares while you're doing it. It's great to have a beer or two on brew day, but make it a beer or two. Don't make it a party. The more beer you drink, the sloppier your processes are going to be, the more mistakes you're going to make, and you'll end up with a bit of a disaster. So have a beer, but brew responsibly. Number 7, and this really deserves to be a bit higher in the list, but there are so many important things in that first 5. But number 7 is get into kegs as soon as you can. It's a bit more expense, so you've got the cost of the keg, you've got the cost of the CO2 tank, you've got the cost of the fittings. You've got to have some way to cool it down, whether it's a beer fridge or whether you're going to put it into a kegerator or a converted chest freezer, whatever it is. There is that extra cost associated with it, but in the long run, it's a lot cheaper and it's going to save you time, it's going to save you money, it's going to save you effort. You don't have to individually clean bottles. You don't have to individually fill bottles and then cap bottles. So at the end of the day, it's a much simpler process to keg beer than to bottle beer. And it's a lot quicker. It really does pay for itself in the long run. You've also got a lot more control over the quality of the beer that's coming out. When you're bottling, there's a much greater risk of overcarbonating and causing bottle bombs. There's a greater risk of infection. So you end up with bottles, the odd random bottle that's got a bacteria in it, and it's not going to be a pleasant experience. So kegging, in my opinion, is the way to go. Number 8, get an accurate thermometer. If you've got a brew house like the Grainfather or the Brewzilla, and they've got temperature gauges on the side of them, check them. Check them against a reliable thermometer and make sure that they are actually accurate within a degree, because the last thing you want is to be mashing in at 59 degrees, because you're not going to get the enzymes activated like you need to convert starches into sugars. If you're brewing on a stovetop, then make sure that your thermometer is accurate, and if possible, that you can either adjust it or make yourself out a little table to show what the adjustments are to get an accurate reading from it. You need to calibrate it against an accurate source. Number 9 is learn your brewing system, get to know it intimately. Whether it's a stock pot on a stove, whether it's a Brewzilla or a Grainfather or an SS Brewtech or any of those, whatever you're using to brew, get to know it. Again, going back to the same old theme, and it's the same thing being said over and over again, brew multiple batches on it. You need to get to learn that system, and you're not going to do it in one or two batches. So brew something simple on it. Again, make it a smash malt or a pale ale or a Vienna ale. But brew on it a couple of times and get to know how it works. It's going to take you a couple of brew days to get used to it. So make those brew days while you're getting used to your new brew system something simple that you know is going to turn out okay. Number 10, if you've got a brew system like the Brewzilla or the Grainfather where you can pump the wort out, then invest in a plate chiller or a counterflow chiller. The immersion chillers that come with them, I've used them and they do take quite a long time to chill the beer. The one time I used that immersion chiller, I think it took nearly 45 minutes, and that's using a lot of water. By comparison, the counterflow chiller that I use now chills the beer down in a single pass. So 5 to 10 minutes is all it takes, and as soon as that wort comes out of the chiller, I know that it's chilled down to around 24 degrees. So that saves a lot of time, and it chills your beer quickly so that you're not waiting around, you're not hanging around, and the quicker you chill your beer, the less chance there is of it picking up some sort of infection as well. Number 11, and I learned this one personally, buy the biggest brew system you can afford to buy. I went with a 35 litre system, and while it did me for a little while, the size of the batches that I want to brew now are too much for that brew house to handle. I'd have been much better going for a 65 litre or even a 114 litre system, something that can handle the size of the batches I want to do. If you've got any inkling that you're going to enjoy this hobby, then as soon as you start looking into one vessel or three vessel brew houses, save yourself a lot of trouble in the long run and scale it up, size it up straight away. Once you start getting the hang of it, and as soon as your mates realise that you're brewing a really decent beer, you're going to have people coming round to help you drink it. So you're going to need a bigger system anyway. Number 12, and this kind of ties in with number 11, to save money, look for used equipment. You don't need to buy the latest and greatest that's just come out. You can look for used equipment, and it may only have a couple of batches on it. You know, some people get into it, they figure out they don't have the time, they don't have the passion to do it themselves. So they do a couple of batches and that's it. Or there could be people who have bought a system and now they're upgrading to something different. So they're selling their old equipment. And this is one way that you can buy a bigger system and save a bit of money at the same time. So keep an eye out on places like Marketplace and the online classifieds. Even eBay may have a bargain on there every now and again for used equipment. And just wait for something to come up that's in the size range that you want and the style of equipment that you want, and save yourself $1. Number 13, clean as you go. As you finish with one piece of equipment, clean it straight away. As soon as you're finished with your brew house, as soon as you get the wort out of there and into the fermenter, don't leave it for the next day, because there's going to be trub and hops in the bottom of that fermenter, and if you leave them overnight, it's going to be manky, it's going to be smelly, and it's not going to be a pleasant experience cleaning it out. So get that out of your brew house straight away. The other thing is that water's full of sugar, and if you leave it and it dries out, it gets sticky and nasty, and you're going to have to scrub it instead of just cleaning it. Get a good quality cleaner into it, like PBW or sodium percarbonate. Warm it up so that it activates those enzymes, and cover all of your equipment. As you're finished with bits and pieces, like your smaller items like hydrometers or measuring tubes or pipettes or whatever, have a bucket standing by full of PBW or your cleaning solution, your chosen cleaning solution, and just drop them in, rinse them off and just drop them in there. And in 15 minutes they're clean, they're ready to be rinsed and put away. Number 14 is spigots are good on fermenters. So you can see on this fermenter, I've put a ball lock valve on there. That means when I want to empty this out, I just turn the handle to empty it, and then turn the handle to turn it off again. This one's specifically designed for not beer. I don't have beer in here, I have other things in here. So I wouldn't use this particular ball lock valve on a beer fermenter. But I do like the spigots that come where you turn the handle that way against the valve, not the ones where you got to turn them that way with the valve. Because when you turn them with the valve, it tends to turn the whole spigot around, and before you know it, you've got wort all over the floor. So stay away from them and get the ones where you open the spigot that way. Number 15, storage of your beer is important. If you don't have a beer fridge, then you need to store your beer in a cool, dark spot, but preferably in a beer fridge. If you don't have a kegerator or a dedicated beer fridge, then try and set a shelf aside in your fridge where you can keep your beers cool. But like I said, if you don't have that facility, then it's got to be somewhere cool and dark. And number 16, the final point that I want to make, and it's more of an opinion than a point, lagers are the best styles to brew. I know people want to get into their hazies and their IPAs and NEPAs and hazy pale ales and all these different styles, but there's nothing wrong with a good, crisp, clean lager. Anyway, that's it for this week. It really helps us out if you like, subscribe and comment. And check us out on the socials. And until next time, slàinte.